But yeah, take inspiration from where you can. I think that it's weird. It's weird to even think. Anytime I'm like writing out like visions and like basically building out new philosophies, I'm just like, who the fuck am I to do this? But then I like realize that. Then I realize that like some of the most popular philosophies are pretty bad, right? Or
Oh
they're just,
yeah.
so it's like, how do you? It's like there's a gap, right? Okay, if I'm not going to do it, someone's got to do it. And I think there's also just as there's a great, I almost feel like a responsibility given my story for why I want to create an evolutionary sort of philosophy that like does take from a lot of the philosophies that I've rejected.
Yeah.
So I think the messenger really matters, and for whatever reason, I think that I could be a good one.
Oh, I think you're an excellent messenger. I consider myself a synthesizer also. And I think you, I don't really think there are that many new ideas. And that's okay. I don't really have any original ideas, but I do think it's important for every generation, every person of a particular background to have somebody who is arranging these ideas in the language that people are familiar with.
Exactly. Thank you for that. Thank you. That's a good articulation of that.
And
Yeah.
it really is important. And I think we burden ourselves quite frequently with the aspiration of originality. And I don't believe that's that important. The synthesis itself coming from you is necessarily going to be original while still necessarily being reminiscent of all of these other. We stand on the shoulder of giants, which is
Absolutely.
actually absolutely how it should be.
Absolutely. Yep. I appreciate that. No, that's exactly what that's a great way to look at it. Yeah. Anytime I just feel like not courageous enough, I just remember like from first principles, like this makes sense. Like this, the worst thing that happens that could happen is that it doesn't get as widely adopted as I would like. But it's even if it's this is like the worst case scenario, even if it's really just like has been an exercise in articulating what I believe, it's great. Now I can point. It's like instead of just having to ramble to someone about what I've been, it's like they can read it, right? It's
Yeah.
like, are we on the same? It's like, are we lying?
And it's even the simple fact that guys like you and me, and you touched upon this in your conversation with John Vervecchi, the dialogos, the conversation and exchange of ideas helps you work things out in and of itself.
Right.
And it's like a man never steps in the same river twice because it's not the same river and he's not the same man. And that's what exactly these conversations do. It's where we are trying to figure out how we are going to articulate these ideas, what works, what doesn't, and having this sort of ongoing dialogue. You're 29, right? If you even had the inkling that you had figured out a life philosophy at 29, I don't think I'd want to be talking to you because that would be a pretty pinnacle of hubris. So 44, I am still struggling with these things, and I plan to keep on struggling with these things because if you're struggling because you're still doing work and it's an important work and you have the humility not to think that you have the answer yet.
But also the confidence to know that the many of the dominant philosophies are very problematic. So
Oh yeah. So is there any that you would like to talk about that? Because that's, I will tell you, the problematic dominant philosophy is the main theme on this show.
I don't know. I can even just point out like like a through line across problematic philosophies. It's lack of willingness to engage in idea exchange and to be self-critical, self-aware.
And that's one of the things that impresses me about you so much is, I mean, even when I jump into, hey, I'm going to be critical, I'm coming from this doomer optimist thing, you're like, yeah, I kind of agree. I just don't like framing it like that kind of thing. You have a particular willingness to engage in a true search for truth that is refreshing.
Yeah, I guess here's another common like critique I have about dominant philosophies. It is like compromising the truth for profit to kind of speak to an existing deluded audience, right?
Yeah.
When I talk about like advising, and it could be I would be honored to advise any sort of president, right? But like when I talk about advising like a Republican president, I'm not endorsing almost anyone, right? In the Republican Party. One thing that I try to avoid, although I don't always succeed, is like saying this person's good, this person's bad, this organization's good, this all that, right? The thing that I'm pointing to when I talk about the Republican Party probably being the highest potential to actually make government more efficient is not saying, oh, Republicans are good. I'm just seeing things for what they are. There's one party that is increasingly unified with how things are, right, and defending it. And then there's another party that's like, that, whether it's ironic or not, identifies as the rebels now. And so if we can agree long term that someone should create a culture and processes for like creating increasing efficiencies within government agencies, potentially eliminating government agencies, sometimes creating new ones that are needed, right? Being very interrogating of what should be around, it's going to be the Republican Party. I'd be happy to be proven wrong, right? I'd be happy to be pleasantly surprised by Biden tomorrow being like, it's time for us to really run a tight ship in the government. It's not gonna happen, right? It's not gonna happen. I think people should not completely write off entire parties. They should not just fall in love with entire parties and be like slaves to them. They should, I'd say, like the foundational tech space that I want to help manifest. And I'm not saying that there's so many companies that I would consider foundational tech. I think there's a lot of power in a space realizing it's a space, a scene realizing it's a scene, like individuals realizing that they should be connected to a bigger movement, right? So they actually have political influence, right? Because government regulations do affect how much foundational tech can be created.
I wanted to run away from the world for a bit of time. I thought I was just going to escape and get over all of it, but I don't think that's really possible so much.
So it'll be a really interesting one thing that you can't. I almost feel like Twitter is like a mirror to what's happening in the world. It's very chaotic. And I'm also literally saying the organization of Twitter. So the social media ecosystem and then the organization, they're both mirroring what's happening in the world, which is very chaotic. And it's also extremely entertaining. And there's also an extreme amount of opportunity for people that do not get caught up in just join like a random mob that forces them to relinquish their free thinking abilities. And
yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. The ability to independently state your ideas without feeling like you're going to be punished by the mob is very important.
Punished by any mob, really.
Yeah.
I think it's important for people on the quote unquote to have self-awareness that they get triggered by stuff as well. And
sure.
It's almost like if you identify with an inability to be the mob, like you're going to have more likelihood of being the mob. Same with SBF. Like if everyone's telling you that you're going to be like Warren Buffett except better, and past presidents are just singing your praises, I think I love that this is a case study now, right? I love it because it's so rich with relevant themes and motifs of our day, of establishment consensus about this organization and this person is good and we should listen to them. And yeah,
paying off the Clintons, paying off the Democratic Party. His father is a tax expert in like tax shelters for Stanford as a lawyer.
It's so funny. So it's like every elite institution got on board, like in one way or another.
Tom fucking Brady got on board.
Gary Gensler's former boss is the CEO of Alameda's father, right?
Father, yeah.
Like incredible amount of conflicts of interest here. And I'm glad that eroding trust in government. It's like, we need better government, right? We need more accountable government. And this is, yes, both parties have been extremely corrupt over the past many years.
But the Democrats are way better at it.
The union of big media, big sports, big Hollywood, big banks, big consulting, big tech, and the Democratic Party, like all having the shared consensus, is a huge danger, right? What?
It's an unbelievable monstrosity.
It's very dangerous. And I am the last person that would excuse the sins of the Republican Party, but it's what's important is to understand that these parties are shells, right? Entities that they're malleable, except the Democratic Party is less malleable because it really is there's so much pride in this like institution, right? It's almost like the Republican Party, it's like this malleable thing that also has ballot access everywhere in the country.
Yeah.
But there's no consensus on what it is.
But seemingly not mail-in ballot access.
So it has this, my critique, and I support people, absolutely. I support people starting third parties and nonpartisan reform. I'm a huge fan of that. The practical thing is if you want to rise in power very quickly, it's you recognize that the Republican Party lacks identity and leadership, that lacks a consensus about what it is, creates a huge opportunity for someone like DeSantis to remake it. And the thing about, I guess the final thing I want to say is when you have such a strong control over a party, you can also, like, you've gained so much trust with a voter base like DeSantis has, you can shift the views of your super followers, right, in a positive way, right? And so he's actually already invested in the environment in Florida. I don't know if you knew that.
No.
He's invested I think hundreds of millions of dollars, right, in climate adaptation stuff and stuff that you'll never hear reported really. But imagine him doing that on a national scale and in a way that's like really practical too. It's not just doing research into far out technologies. It's Texas is like whatever, like coastal cities around the country are gonna go be submerged if there's not federal help. We're going to do that, right? We're going to protect people's property, right? There's a way to get people on board with acknowledging that there's climate changes without sounding like John Kerry. You know what I mean? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, I think I think there's a lot of opportunity with, I don't want to put labels on myself, but like disaffected former partisans that really understand like how you might be able to message to both the Republican base and at least like moderate and center left type people. So it's going to be a really interesting decade.
Oh, sure.
And I'm really excited about people realizing that they need to be in charge of their own lives and that they should stop kind of outsourcing their trust, outsourcing making like their own lives better and to other people, because you get again and again you get duped.
Yeah, man, 100% with you on that one.
Yeah.